Nice to see you all. If you can like hit the heart, that'd be awesome because that helps the algorithm. Um, Welcome back to Freedom Over Fascism. I'm here with Olga Nesterova, and who is a an independent journalist, and I'm going to ask her to introduce herself more deeply, and then we'll get into chatting. And in the meantime, I'm going to try to figure out how I get to see the chat better. All right. So
Yes.
please welcome, Olga, and please introduce yourself at whatever level of detail that you like.
Well, thank you so much for having me here, Stephanie. It's such an honor. I watch you, I read you, I appreciate you. And if anybody's watching who is somehow subscribed to me and did not manage to subscribe to you, please do that. Okay, guys? That's your first assignment here. But as to me, as you mentioned, I'm an independent journalist. I started as former diplomat working for UN, came in all this bushy-tailed with my dreams to change the world for better, and then got introduced to the reality of politics. And ultimately, I understood that change can come from within, and information is really the key, right? And whether you win over fascism or any type of constellation that is hurting people and hurting democracy. And so I am now former White House correspondent. I was in President Biden's pool. Of course, with this administration, I got a fat denied from the Oval Office because I do ask questions. And but I do cover G7, G20, NATO, and I'm traveling. I'm there. I'm talking to people and producing this daily newsletter here on Substack and going live every day. So that's essentially what I do.
That is great. So everybody, at the top of your screens, if you're not subscribing to one or the other of us, you can do that. And please feel free to chime in on the chat. I see some of you that I know. And so, Olga, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, well, the news of the day is the Epstein survivors came out with their press conference and described some of their experiences. Uh, what what is your response to what they had to say, and what are your fears or hopes, or what do you think we're going to learn from this ultimately?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for saying that this is the news of the day, because we had all types of distractions. We had flyovers that you and I and everybody was watching sponsored here without our consent. We had all types of conversations about nothing, right? The same gibberish that we are hearing every day that just leaves us confused. Now, this is indeed the news of the day. What is good? What is good is that we're hearing, that we're listening, that we as observers and supporters feel less that we are living in some twilight zone where nobody hears us, where we think that we're delusional because we do care, right?
Right.
Where our requests for information, basic information, are remaining unanswered. And that is the good part. The good part is that the survivors found strength and power to talk about it, because there's so many women, women, whoever, was part of such horrific experience that would not dare to speak about it and do so publicly. And then also speaking also partially against the regime. There were some of them who specifically mentioned that Epstein was bragging about his connection to Trump. This was his biggest, brag, essentially, and the biggest plus point among others. Then they mentioned that they will produce a list of all the people who abused them. And perhaps there are, to your point, lists before, but were gathered before. And they took space. They took space in the media world and in the news cycle. The world is talking about it, not just United States. And we start talking about it. Now, as what I hope that this will produce, information and fair trial, and those who are at fault will be, in jail. But in reality, this administration is holding, power over mostly even all parts of government, right? And so, will Supreme Court act? Will the Congress act? We don't know because they're all afraid of Trump. But good that we hear about it and we learn more.
Right. And it seems that given the number of Republicans that have sort of come on board to hear them, that maybe the tide is turning a little bit, that they're feeling the pressure from their constituents that covering this up is not what people want. I think, especially with the way that it's talked about in the press, we forget the press often, and that's a big, the press. That's a lot of different things at once, but
Right.
often talk about these women as women that were abused. But it's really important to remember that they were kids and that
Absolutely.
these are, right? This is child rape that we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're not talking about consulting adults. We're not talking about adults at all. Um, so I think that that was one thing that really came out and that we need to keep repeating so that it gets played down a little bit, I think,
Yeah.
because we don't remember that they were kids when it happened.
That's such a great point that you're making because we don't have the visual, right? We have adult women standing there, adult
Hmm.
women who look great, who take care of themselves, right? And so the visual then becomes really distraught as to what these people did. And to your point, we talk about pedophiles
Hmm.
abusing children, right? I mean, maybe they could stand with a picture of themselves when that happened, but all of that is uh, to your point, media, mainstream media for sure, independent journalists, I think, doing a far better job than the mainstream media does, but really talk about them being kids and these people abusing kids. It's a great point, really. Absolutely.
Right. And the other thing is that, the regime right now will throw anything against the wall to try to get this off the front screens, front pages, right? Right? The regime bombed Venezuela last night. Russia's trying to shoot uh, EI, European leaders out of the sky. Well, just
Yeah. Yeah.
make their GPS not work. Um, so were you surprised at all that this came off without a major announcement or troop incursion or some other event that would compete with it as the main narrative of the day?
I mean, based on the tweets and just, critical thinking, Trump is very upset because he's not in China right now. His biggest takeaway and his biggest diversion of anything would be showing up together with the dictators and being part of this killers club, essentially. But he's not invited, he's not part of that team. So that failed. And I think this was the biggest hope to end up there. Now, we don't know what happened through that, 4 days or whatever, ultimately a week that we haven't seen Trump. I get the poll reports. I don't trust those poll reports. I know the people who put those poll reports together who were greeting President Biden every morning, harassing him and asking him for proof of life, even though he was standing in front of them. So
Right.
that aside, we don't know what happened in those 4 days. We don't know how Trump tried to go to Beijing. Could he possibly physically fly there? Did he have COVID or, anything that did happen to him? Maybe he had a surgery. Who knows, right? We don't really know. So something did happen that prohibited him from going there. Either he didn't do enough to earn the invitation. Invitation was pending a month ago, so
Mhm.
it was kind of out there. But ultimately, he wasn't invited. Um, so I think that they put the eggs in that basket. Now, as to and then they had to, I mean, you see like how Trump administration works. They're very inefficient, they're uneducated, they're unprofessional, they're even bad in conspiring and doing all this, right? Kremlin is by far ahead with their, propaganda machine. It's in fact a machine, and this here is some type of a bicycle. So they then start scrambling. What can we do? And then you have today this right-wing president of Poland coming to the White House. Then suddenly we have a flyover for what? For president of Poland? Like, what's happening here? So they try to scramble and have some type of diversion. That happened exactly at the same time when survivors were speaking in Washington, D.C. So intimidation did happen. What I think they're now heavily scrambling for is how to divert what's going to follow after. Because them speaking is one story. And if they would have prohibited them from speaking at the Capitol or anywhere, they could have gone to another place and just had the same type of exposure, right? Or go live and talk about it. But the point is, what are they going to do with the information that is now out there?
Right.
How it's going to pivot? Ultimately, if you think about propaganda machines, Putin's machine or Xi or whoever, they have to have a victim. They have to blame somebody. They have to say that this was a bad guy, so we're going to prosecute him, but our guy is a good guy. So who's going to be that bad guy on that list? Ultimately, to your point, neither MAGA supporters who fail to understand that Trump is part of that crew, um, no, nor we will shut up about it. So who's going to be that scapegoat? Like, who's going to be that person to be blamed? And I think that's their biggest concern now, because that will be the biggest diversion. You know?
Either that or, really starting a war or,
Yeah.
invading Chicago or, all the other things they've got in their toolkit.
I
Do
think
you
that follows. I mean, the Chicago is in plans, and National Guard is already at the military base near Chicago, so that is already in motion. To your point, and sorry for interrupting, but with Venezuela, this is just makes absolutely no sense. And Trump puts this video of this little boat that suddenly United States bombed with 11 people who got killed. We don't know what type of drugs they had there. Did they have drugs or whatever? Rubio directed this whole operation with CNN even asking him, do you have the authority to do that? So to your point, that is the diversion that
Mhm.
was today.
Right. Since I was so focused on watching the news conference, I didn't see the breadth of the coverage, and maybe you did and can help us um, understand what the legacy media picked up. I think they were covering
I
it except for Fox.
In all
Um,
honesty, I haven't seen it. I just saw different posts where people compared how all channels were covering the conference, aside Fox was covering Trump at the Oval Office. So I tend to stay away from them because it's just when I need to see like what the propaganda machine, the U.S. propaganda machine, has to say, because otherwise I'll start fighting them and it's a waste of time. So, um, but to your point, what will be their takeaway, right?
right. So, do you have any? So, I assume that when you were in the Biden press pool, and writing about Biden every day, that you had additional sources that helped corroborate whatever was going on in the press room. And maybe that's a big assumption. Do you have any sources inside the regime now that are telling you anything about um, what's going on in the White House or even in other parts of the regime that are in motion besides the things we all know about?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Biden administration, and my focus is foreign affairs, and so my connections are at the embassies, at the different, like this week I spent hours emailing all embassies and all representations of different countries for the UN General Assembly to attend on the record, off the record meetings, and so. I'm on their press list. I'm able to follow up and talk to diplomats and figure out what's going on. So when Biden was in power and was president, the idea of what Europeans are thinking about what he's doing in regards to Ukraine, also in regards to Israel and Palestine, and what are those moving, particles in that constellation. As to now, it's different, right? Because we need to kind of go back a little bit. So when Biden was still president, Um, the press pool consisted of mainly American media. Yes, and I can tell you, FSB agents were still present at the White House press room, at the State Department. I'm Ukrainian born US citizen, so I do speak Russian. I received so many Bluetooth requests with documents in Russian to start conversation with them. In full transparency, I sent them dick pics back. I Googled them. So the point is, they were still there. And these agents are working for media that pretends to be Ukrainian media, Belarusian media, even so far as Korean and whatnot. So they are very much implanted into different organizations, pretending that they are representing a different country
Okay.
to put it out there. Okay. Which is really part of that regime, and they have their hands everywhere. And there already, it was very clear before the election that if Trump wins, the press pool spots will be already sold out to mainly Russian and Chinese media.
Okay.
So whoever travels with him, we hear from the main person who puts the poll reports together, or the mainstream media that shows us this, literally the live streams and whatever is happening there.
Hmm.
Others are still asking questions. We don't hear those questions in our media sphere, but they are, very publicized in Russian and Chinese, whatever media. So whatever Trump tells them is very much dominating their news cycle. So from what I hear is people who authentically want access to Trump and want to ask questions are denied entrance to the Oval Office. Most of them have access to the White House. They were not denied access to entire premises. Neither was I. But the problem is, can you come to the Oval Office where you can ask questions? Because the press room itself, we see Caroline Levitt. This is just a whole, like, it's part of that reality show. She's not really answering questions. She's not even
No.
asking people who have authentic questions, right? So, to your long story short point, what I do hear, for instance, about Trump, they said that we honestly don't really have pictures of him. We're told what to present and what to write, but honestly, we haven't seen him since Tuesday. So, which was very different from the regular operations where he's in front of people, he's talking to everybody. He didn't want to be seen or heard. Other stories were that he had issues with speaking. Yesterday, we didn't see much of those issues, but maybe this was temporary. Um, all of them said that there were roads blocked not only to Walter Reed, but also to Virginia Hospital, and that is on the way to his golf course.
Uh,
Essentially, that in him playing, they haven't seen him even arriving at the golf course because they were uh, waving him goodbye, right? When he and his SUV were leaving the White House. Then they were transported to his golf course and like sort of like a tennis court where they couldn't see anything what's going on outside. They were kept there for hours and then said, well, Trump has left, so now we're going back to the White House. So anything could have happened in between. So that's, what I hear.
and do you have any like whispers of what people think it might be, or are we just gonna like wait until we find?
Some were saying that Vance was very present. And we see it also in the poll reports because last time we heard of from Trump last week was Tuesday, 12:30. Wednesday it was reported that he spoke to Waltz and he spoke to others about the shooting. And then Thursday and Friday were all VP reports, pool reports. Vance was traveling. Suddenly he was holding speeches. Today he's also visiting the victims. So, and his wife, like all of that started being more about Vance. One reporter told me that Vance were seen at the Oval Office when Trump wasn't there during the weekend. Some people saw him with documents, but again, I'm not there. I'm not seeing it, but that's what I hear, for what it's worth.
That's very interesting. Um, can you tell me? So, I just want to take a break from this, what's going on exactly right now, but I would like to hear more about your background and what you got you involved in the UN and then in journalism. I would love to hear more about your story.
My story. Born in Ukraine, grew up in Germany, studied in Netherlands. They had a dual degree program, so I ended up coming to U.S. to North Carolina. So graduated there, and my dream was always to do something that would be valuable. You
Mhm,
know, I was always looking at art and anything that people would leave as legacy when they're not even there anymore. There's something that is still useful. So that was my thing. I'm, not a scientist or anything to benefit the world in that regard, but um, my point was when I came to UN and I thought that, my whole thesis there was about maritime law, and I wrote this 75 pages book. Essentially, it's still at the UN library about how you can amend law to protect people who are, essentially our navy and anybody's navy, essentially, from being taken over by pirates and whatever. And what was interesting when I did put that together, I was at the mission of Ukraine. And at that point, I left Ukraine when I was 13. So my, behavior is different. My, understanding of the world is different. Yes, I speak Russian and Ukrainian, but I grew up in Germany, Netherlands, and whatever, right? And so when I was there, they said, well, you're so eager to work. So you're now going to go to all the meetings. So I went to meetings with Ban Ki-moon at that point, with meetings with friends in Palestine. And when this was the part where Hamas was winning the election, changing their constitution, their leadership of Palestine, actual Palestine, crying and saying, please save us from it. So all of that was there. Ultimately, ended up in there's like a bunker underneath the security console where they literally talk about wars and
mhm,
constellation of troops. And I somehow ended up negotiating the pricing of soldiers who will be in the first lines, and then you have to like negotiate how many essentially cents are per person that is, you know, seen
mhm,
to be, dying first or whatever, which was very rough on me. Couldn't sleep, start speaking to be like, what are we doing? Lives are worth, those are real people that we're talking about. They said, well, this is just statistics, get over it. And ultimately, I thought, look, if I stay here and I change my mindset to think as they do, and they also had this notion that the higher you climb, like on a tree, the less wiggle room you have, right? Because you end up on, some top positions within the UN or any political organization, then you should talk less and do less to maintain that position. I thought, what is that? That's just stupid. And ultimately, realized I don't want to change because I want to look in the mirror and be proud of me. So departed. And why journalism? I still was writing my thoughts and what we can do. People started responding to it. And the source of information in the US, what I thought at that point was, of course, the White House and DC itself and Department of State. Um, then when you end up there, you learn that there's so many different parts that you have to, of course, read between the lines. But if you're trained as a diplomat, you kind of have a more type of better understanding. And what I'm really passionate about is democracy.
mhm,
And I know a lot of people talk about it, and it's trendy and all of it, but it's just an interesting concept where we kind of granted voice and opinion and freedom to act. But all of that depends on us to fight for it on the daily basis, right? And that is
mhm,
the concept of democracy. And I think
right.
media plays such a huge role because this is, on one hand, it's the information that people are getting. So they can make decisions based on that information. But it's also the voice of the people that should be, right, dominating the decision making process in those institutions. And what happens in the US, which is a result, what I think, of the, I would say, FSB and those, institutions that implanted themselves here. The result is that people are not getting fair information. It changed with internet and independent journalism and everything. And also, those institutions are not really hearing people.
Right.
Because if you think about it, Trump is watching television more than you and I combined.
Yeah.
And he's not getting anything that is going within the country. He's
Right.
watching Fox News that feeds him the same BS that he puts out in the morning.
Well, because they know he's their audience,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So it's
And
a cycle that is completely broken. And that is the result of the fading democracy that we have, because you can't rely on anything. And I think we are in this position where it will come down to, will people go on the streets? Not for one day, not for specific occasion. Will people come forward, stand in front of those troops, whoever, tanks or whatever, and fight for those who will come after us?
right. Do you so we you've you've been watching and listening and reading our stuff, I say as if I'm more than one person, but for a while. And last spring I was really focusing hard on the fact that truth seemed to be facts and truth seem to be very difficult to come by and agree on. So I was looking for all the different ways that pro democracy forces could communicate with people to bypass the the crap that they were getting in the legacy media, because the legacy media is there to make money.
Yeah, business.
Business, right? Do you feel that you and other members of the independent media have been able to make any progress in terms of breaking through the Fox News or the CNN or even MSNBC, that constant stream of information, and the bloggers and the podcasters? Do you feel like there are pro-democracy forces that are breaking through?
I hear it from people who read and watch me that we have unsubscribed from this and now we're getting this information. I'm always very keen to also present any articles that I think are relevant, or those who are, like you have a voice, right, and platform. I think this will come down to us doing live streams like we do now
Mhm,
and aligning, because the idea is we're so focused on opinions, because everything you mentioned, from mainstream media to podcasters to influencers of any kind, it's a lot of opinions from people who deserve to have opinions. And
mhm,
then there's a big question mark: do we all have to listen to those opinions? Right?
right.
History plays huge role.
Mhm,
Historians like you are play huge roles, because that's where the facts come from.
mhm,
And we're not diving into, the Bible, talking about facts or whatever. That's all, if you want to debate it, cool. But the history 80 years ago,
mhm,
because our grandparents told us about this. They told what different actors were doing. They told us about the mindset. And now all of that is being repeated. So if we cannot learn from 80 years ago, I mean, that's on us. And I think what can be really important, because how does social media work? Essentially, and I was studying it for the last couple of weeks, trying to figure out, like, how do you get through to people, to your point? And it's all very personality based, right? And that's how
mhm.
Trump essentially became who he is. If you like somebody's personality, you will listen to them talking about politics and cooking and sports and diet and everything, because you love their personality, so you consume their content. And I wish for those with huge accounts who are, dominating the media sphere in, let's say, cooking or whatever, that they would be shouting out professionals in other categories like
Mhm.
historians, people who report on the news, people who talk about medicine, talk about what is happening with CDC, doctors, because those professionals, scientists and whatnot, usually lack that personality factor because you think like, I'm a professional, I'm a scientist, or I'm a historian. I know what I'm doing. I'm writing this. I don't need to go to on social media and be like, hey guys, and do all this,
Mhm.
right? Which
Right.
actually draws attention. So we need to somehow, combine it. But what I'm optimistic about is that people, they started reading more, what I
Mhm.
feel, right? Substack essentially came up with just because of this trend, because people are so sick of reading mainstream media, not just watching, but also reading. And they want to read from those who are not afraid to put the reality into words, right?
Right.
Uh,
There's a combination of, the people who read and then the people who watch, reels and TikToks
mhm.
and we need to be reaching out to all of them. One of the things that I am seeing that is making me a little bit optimistic is that there are a number of other Substackers who are beginning the top level, the Jim Acostas and the Ruth Ben Giats and the Midas Touch guys, like all of them, they're on each other's shows all the time. And so their audience gets consolidated. But I think at a slightly lower level, that's beginning to happen as well. So I've actually been um, invited to two different conversations next week and another one the week after. And so I'm also trying to have more conversations with more people on Substack so that we can build a community that's maybe, there's the big ones, um, but then there are, smaller accounts like mine, although most of the other accounts are bigger than mine, um, where we can add different kinds of perspectives than the ones who are, have massive, massive accounts. So I'm seeing that happen now, and
I,
that's helpful.
um, in my regard, that's a very good strategy, and this is, on me that I'm not doing such things. My point was to focus on getting information and counting on the information to make the rounds. As to, I'm, let's say, talking to somebody who is, um, like, for instance, when European leaders were at the White House, and I spoke to delegations of two countries. They asked me not to mention, but and so they showed me the documents that Trump was showing to them about Ukraine being pushed to give up the land, about also even negotiating for Russia to buy out US military bases in the NATO sphere, which is like, wow. And I thought this was so delusional. And then next day I hear that this is actually the reality. So I came back and I said, my apologies. I thought you were bullshitting me, but it's actually real. And then I started putting those news out and people started paying attention. Um, but it's very much needed to connect with others who are writing. And again, this is my minus that I don't pay attention to that. But yeah, and I think, altogether, we talked about mainstream media being a business, but also we call it independent journalism. But New York Times also raises money as independent journalism on their website. And they do have a
Mhm.
whole building in Manhattan.
Right.
So we need to ask, what is independent journalism, right?
Fair.
Because you and I probably don't have a building in Manhattan. And
Sadly, no.
yeah, and we use the same words to raise funds and ask
Mhm.
for support.
Yeah.
And that then becomes a very interesting thing because I also tend to say, follow us, we're doing this. And yeah, I have people who help me film things and whatever, but it's mainly me working 24/7, being that crazy person. Um, and I think, shall we talk about what we are actually doing, pretending to be, New York Times and all those institutions? Because we use the same words asking for support. And this is not fair. by far not fair.
Mhm. Well,
So
I mean, that is a big problem, let alone the New York Times, that on a platform so, divide I guess, divided up by different creators, people only have so much money that they can use to support the creators that they like. And whereas on the right wing, their creators are supported by massive infusions of cash,
yeah,
um, which is why the independent creators on our side, unless they happen to be very big and well funded, come and go. And I'm trying to uh, I'm I'm trying to avoid that, but it's hard because, people only have so much. It's the reason why I keep all of my content free,
yeah.
um, but then there's there's nothing hidden, so
No, I totally feel you, and that is a question that we need to also talk about because um I removed all the paying whatever things on Substack, on the website, everywhere, because I believe that information should be free. Because if we start charging for truth while bullshit is available for free, and alongside movies and whatever people pay to get their cable and to watch everything else, but they also get the BS for free, right?
right.
And they're so used to this legacy, like, oh, with dinner, I'm going to put on the news, I'm going to watch my news, and it's just part of our culture. But I mean, movie business did shift that for us now to imagine like run home to turn on TV at 8 p.m. because there will be a movie that we cannot miss is just sounds obnoxious at this point. So Netflix and everybody who copied it and followed after did break this habit.
Mhm,
So at this point we are breaking the habit too. Um, Yes, asking people for, paying for content is, I think, a losing game at this point. Why? Because people can't pay for everything and they're already used to whatever, right? And also, economic situation is not the greatest, honestly. Um, but for those who want to donate and support, offering them those options is important. Now, in other regard, what I, sort of had the barrier with. I spoke to different companies to say, okay, do you want to sponsor? Because I'll promote you. We have the readers, or I have the readers, watchers, whatever. But I would only sign a contract if they will say that they will not dictate what I should say or not say.
right,
And no company would sign it.
really.
Yeah. Because they're like, I don't want to be part of negative news. I don't want to be a part of anti whatever. I want to be neutral. So then what do? Do you become vanilla and say, well, what Trump says is not really authoritarian? It might just sound like it, but maybe he was joking, just so you will keep your sponsorship. And I think that's where decency and dignity comes from and
Mhm,
comes with, right? And I think ultimately, the way it worked with, we see this trend. You had Netflix, you had Hulu, you had Disney, you had everything. And now who's winning is like those providers that give you a package of a few, right?
mhm,
So if there was somebody, maybe one of the journalists or whatever, who would create a package of a few, like you're interested in democracy, okay, here's different people you can sign up for, and this is what you pay for. That would certainly elevate us. But I think it's more the debate between your decency and truthful reporting and making sure it's survivable,
mhm.
right, without abusing people with asking them to pay more.
Right,
Right?
exactly. Right, and I think at the higher levels, the Bulwark and the Contrarian, and there are a bunch of those groups, and I'm even part of a democracy network where they don't give us any money, but, we get to be on their website.
Mhm.
Um, I think you're right, but it also has to be beyond that top level that's already cross promoting each other.
Yeah, yeah,
And if
that
we can bring it to real people, then
yeah. whatever, the point I'm trying to make is that we call mainstream media business, but then those independent journals are also a business already now because there's the
Yes.
tons, right?
Right.
So that's
Exactly.
but who's really independent? You're independent from whom?
Right.
Because you're also running that the political
The
business.
business. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is independent? So maybe there should be a different label or whatever. What I hear is that, those who are having consistent presence on YouTube, let's say, they're capable to monetize it and, earn off of whatever YouTube is planting in terms of commercials there. But again, it's consistency and it takes a very long time to get there. So, I think uh, we had the comment. Uh,
Nicole, wow, you're so right. Ran out of cash for subs. Keep meeting great new people. Yeah.
yeah.
I
And
run out of cash for subs too. I mean,
yeah. Oh, but I think what we can do is really start talking to each other,
Mhm.
escaping the point of everybody opening Twitter, looking for news, copying content. I'm sure you've been in that place where you like posted something and then you see your own content reposted 500 different times without any type of, like reference even. Um, I'm not even saying about thank you or whatever, but I covered G7. I was there recording content, snapping pictures, videos, posting it up
Mhm.
and put it, even like watermarks and whatever. And then I see the biggest accounts, Democratic accounts, using this without any proper justification, not even saying anything about it.
Wow.
So, and that's again, everybody runs their own business. And that's when it becomes, which again, in the MAGA world, they don't have this issue because all of them are being sort of, planted in the right way, which is, organized in their regard. Like, what is mainstream media in the MAGA world? That they are, right?
Right, but it's being paid for by the billionaires,
Yeah,
so they get to control content and people make a living.
yeah.
So, we're getting, we're getting to the end. I wanna ask the people who are watching, if you have any questions for either of us, if you wanna put that in the chat, we can answer, and in the meantime, we'll, keep talking until, we run out of things to say. No, we'll talk for a little bit more, but I invite those of you watching to go in the chat and ask us any questions or make any comments. That would be great. And also keep pressing the heart button, and, if you came in later, subscribe to both of our, Substacks are at the top. If you can subscribe, uh, to both of us, that would be great. Um, so I'm really glad thank you for the hearts. Uh, I am glad that you're talking about cooperation, because I also think that that is where we're gonna make a difference, is that, those of us with different kinds of audiences come together and share what we know and share what we think, and aren't necessarily the big ones that are well funded. Makes it harder for the content creators, but I think it's better for the people who are consuming content.
And I mean, look, you don't build the tallest building by destroying all other buildings. That's what
Right.
losers do, right? And those losers are leading our country now, but that's another story. But you're not me, I'm not you. I cannot say what you have, right? What you have in mind, nor you can say what I have in mind. But I have my focus, you have your own focus. And this is so interesting when these worlds collaborate because I have my experiences. I wasn't born in the US. I had my whole different story. You have yours. You're a historian. I'm, opening a book, and every time I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know that. So, by talking together about the same
Mhm.
subjects, you just find so much more information that you hoped for. And I think just to keep being curious.
Mhm.
Because once you stop being curious about stuff, that's when you become the consumer of whatever they feed you,
That's right.
right? And that's numbness. And that's where you slide into fascism or anything because you stop being curious, like the dodo birds, right? Lost their ability to fly, to run, whatever, because it wasn't needed. They were safe.
Mhm.
Now we need to wake up and figure out we're not safe. So you have to be curious and learn from people. And maybe you don't even agree with everything they have to say. But that's where, you get to expand your horizon and learn more, right?
Think that is a great place to end. I know on here we've got a lot of people who spread the word about different creators, and different people who aggregate articles and history and uh, different places to learn and different people to learn from and different facts to be aware of. So I want to thank everybody here who came to this live. What is the guest name and Substack name? Oh,
Uh, Honest, ONEST. Honest Press is ONEST. Press is where I'm everywhere. Blue Sky, here, X, whatever. And Honest Network, ONEST, is this.
so I hope you will find uh, Olga in all of her places,
Mhm.
and thank you all for coming, and thank you, Olga, for talking. This has been fantastic.
Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you for doing the work every day. I feel you. I know what it is to, commit to it and fight, and just know that you're so appreciated.
As are you. Wow. Well, so thank you all for coming. I'm gonna hit the end button now.